Under the cold lights of the Capitol, power didn't whisper, it schemed. And today, that power wore red lipstick, a flag pin, and a rehearsed smile. The room was already half full by 8:45 a.m. staffers, rushed to arrange documents with trembling hands. Reporters whispered predictions into hidden mics, and overhead the cameras blinked with readiness. The signage read Committee on Ethical Standards in Government, but everyone in the room knew it was theater. And Sarah Palin was ready for her close-up. She swept into the chamber like a stage veteran, not the caricature of her 2008 self, but sharper, more dangerous. This version of Palin had traded homespun charm for calculated control. She shook a few hands, nodded to select senators, and adjusted her mic like it was a weapon she'd polished. Behind the scenes, her aides huddled in the marbled hallway. Voices low. "She's not just testifying," one aide muttered. "This is Palin's comeback moment." Another smirked. "Crockett walks in thinking it's a hearing, but it's a trap. One bad clip, one fumbled answer, and she's branded the extremist forever." Inside, the air shifted as Jasmine Crockett entered the chamber. She wore a black suit with a high collar, elegant, understated. Her walk was measured, her face unreadable. Where others might carry folders or notes, she held only a pen. The kind her father used to sign community grants in the South Dallas courthouse before his death. A quiet artifact of dignity, she took her seat alone at the witness table, shoulders squared, hands folded. The room went still. Then the chairman's gavel struck. "This hearing will come to order." The introductions were formal, procedural, until they reached Palin. She leaned into the mic with a honeyed smile. "Congresswoman Crockett," she began, "thank you for taking time away from social media fame and radical speeches to address the ethical standards we still hold dear in this country." There it was, the first dig. Delivered with a grin, dressed up as gratitude. Jasmine didn't blink. "Happy to be here," she replied, coolly, though I'd hoped we were gathered to uplift standards, not diminish them for entertainment. A flicker of something passed across Palin's face. The crowd murmured. On the live stream, the comments started flying. In that moment, it was clear Crockett didn't come to play defense. She came to expose the rules of the game, and across America, people leaned in, not knowing that what they were about to witness wasn't just testimony. It was war. Asterisk. The microphones were still hot when Sarah Palin leaned back in her leather chair, confidence gleaming in her eyes like polished chrome. The kind of confidence built not on truth but performance. She adjusted her lapel pin, a golden eagle, then slid her reading glasses down her nose, lifting a printed sheet like a judge about to deliver sentence. "I'd like to begin," she said sweetly, "by reading a quote from our witness today." Jasmine sat still, chin high, hands clasped. She'd been through worse. But she knew Palin wasn't starting with facts. She was starting with framing. Palin cleared her throat theatrically. "Systems don't collapse by accident. They're built to fail some and serve others. What we call dysfunction is just injustice getting comfortable." She looked up over her glasses. "Miss Crockett, do you still stand by these words?" Palin asked, her tone saccharine. "I do," Jasmine replied evenly. "Every syllable." Palin chuckled, the kind that's meant to condescend, not share amusement. "Interesting. Because when you say serve others, are you suggesting that this very government which pays your salary is inherently corrupt?" A few senators shifted in their seats. The trap was baited. Jasmine's eyes didn't flinch. "I'm suggesting it's capable of corruption, and history agrees with me." Palin raised a brow. "Do you consider it ethical, Congresswoman, to undermine faith in our institutions while serving in them?" That was it, the soundbite moment. The one her media team would clip and post by lunchtime with a flag-waving caption. But Jasmine didn't give her the eruption she wanted. Instead, she leaned into the mic, slow, precise. "Faith in institutions isn't built by silence. It's built by accountability. You can't fix a foundation you refuse to admit is cracked." A low hum echoed through the gallery. One of the younger aides at Palin's table scribbled something urgently. Palin recovered quickly, feigning a laugh. "Oh, I see. You believe in reconstruction. How noble. Tell me, Congresswoman, what exactly are you rebuilding? A nation or your own image?" Now the blow was personal. Jasmine took a breath. Let the silence do the cutting. I don't need to rebuild my image, Senator. I haven't hidden behind one. A few people in the room gasped, not from volume, but from precision. Palin's lips curled slightly. Her rhythm faltered just for a second. The predator wasn't used to a target that didn't run. Outside, Twitter was catching fire. Inside, the rules of the engagement were shifting. This wasn't going to be a hearing, it was going to be a reckoning, *. Jasmine knew exactly what this was. She'd seen the choreography before, the sudden invitation, the dramatic framing, the selective outrage disguised as patriotism. But what caught her attention wasn't what Palin was saying in the room. It was what her people were whispering outside of it, in the marbled hallway just beyond the hearing chamber. Her legislative aide, Marcus, leaned in and showed her a phone screen. They just launched it, he whispered. Crockett glanced down. Palin American Values PAC join the fight for faith, family, and truth. Live now, streaming in sync with the hearing. Fundraising off the interrogation? They planned this, Marcus added. The timing, the questions, even the media spin. They're selling your silence. Jasmine looked back through the glass. At the senator settling into smug routine, sipping coffee behind constitutional authority, she felt the fire build in her chest. Not anger, but clarity. This wasn't a hearing about ethics. It was a televised ambush. A ritualized spectacle designed to strip her down, make her either shrink or explode. Either way, Palin's Pecas would profit, but Crockett hadn't built her voice by losing control. She didn't need the room's permission to flip the script. She just needed the moment. When she stepped back into the chamber, she carried with her something different. Not notes. Not rebuttals with strategy. One formed in the crucible of being underestimated. The chair tapped the gavel again. Miss Crockett, please respond to the last inquiry. She didn't. Not immediately. Instead, she adjusted the mic and asked, Chair recognizes my right to enter evidence into the record, correct? There was a pause. The Republicans on the panel exchanged glances. Yes, the chair said slowly. Pending relevance. Crockett smiled. Calm, direct. I'd like to enter a recent communication from Senator Palin's campaign office. She slid a packet across the table. An internal memo outlining the timing of this hearing to coincide with a PAC fundraising launch. Palin leaned forward. This is absurd, Jasmine cut her off, voice steady. It also includes talking points for conservative media outlets, explicitly instructing them to paint this hearing not as policy review, but as a moral standoff against the radical left. Their words, not mine. The room went tense. The camera zoomed in. I thought this hearing was about ethics, Jasmine continued. Turns out it's a marketing campaign. And I'm not here to play the villain in anyone's commercial. No one spoke, even the gavel. Sat still, suspended in the judge's trembling hand. Outside, social media erupted. The trap had been set. But Crockett had brought a mirror. And suddenly the predator looked a lot like prey. * The next morning's headlines hadn't even cooled. Before Jasmine stepped back into the hearing room, a room that now felt different, tighter, less rehearsed. The usual smugness on the faces of Palin's allies had dulled into caution. They weren't just fighting a politician now. They were fighting a storyteller with evidence, and the public was listening. Jasmine's team had worked overnight. Marcus, eyes red from lack of sleep, slid a printed email across the table just before the cameras rolled. Found it in the FOIA dump. Timestamped, verified. She scanned it. A senior staffer from Palin's office, Dennis Kolchuk, had emailed a private donor list with a smug summary. This hearing is the opportunity we've waited for. Time to remind folks who belongs in their capital ... And who doesn't, Beneath it, a laughing emoji. Jasmine's jaw tightened. They weren't just using her. They were mocking the idea of her belonging here in the first place. By the time the gavel struck and the hearing resumed, she was already inside the moment, precise, focused, and merciless. Before I respond to further questions, she said, raising the printed email, I'd like to enter another document into the public record. Palin looked up, eyes narrowing. This is a communication from Senator Palin's office. Jasmine continued, voice sharp as glass, sent to a select group of campaign donors. In it, a staffer describes this hearing as an opportunity to remind folks who belongs here, meaning in this building, at this table, holding this mic. She paused. Let the words settle. Now I don't know what your definition of belonging is, Senator, but mine was built in courtrooms and church basements, not country clubs and gated pack retreats. Palin interjected, raising her voice just enough to sound alarmed, not angry. That email doesn't reflect my views. No? Jasmine asked. Because what it reflects is a mindset, one where proximity to power is inherited, not earned, where people like me are invited into rooms just to be dressed down, not heard. A flicker of unease passed over Palin's face. Not fear, recognition. The next line of questioning was supposed to be procedural, dull, technical, the kind that makes public hearings stretch into white noise. But Sarah Palin didn't want white noise. She wanted to trigger a reaction. To catch Jasmine Crockett. Slipping, unraveling, interrupting. Because outrage makes better headlines than clarity. Palin flipped through a stack of prepared questions and selected one like a blade from a velvet case. Congresswoman, she began, you've objected repeatedly today to how this hearing has been framed. So allow me to clarify the record. She turned to face the room, not Jasmine, and raised her voice. We are here today to uphold the sacred ethical standards of this institution, to defend it from ideological threat or foreign, or domestic, whether external or elected. A soft ripple of reaction moved through the chamber. The implication was clear. Jasmine didn't take the bait. Not yet, Palin pivoted quickly. Now, in your 2022 address to the National Legal Equity Summit, you stated, and I quote, the law was written by men who owned others. And yet we're still told it's neutral. Would you consider that an ethical statement? Jasmine tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowed. I'd consider it a historical one, Palin smirked. So you're suggesting this institution, this body, this legal framework, is unethical by design? Jasmine uncrossed her hands and leaned forward, voice steady. I'm saying the law has always reflected the ethics of those who have the power to write it. And when the powerful fear accountability, they often call it disrespect, murmurs again. This time not just from aides, but from media observers and fellow senators. Palin turned sharply. Objection irrelevant. This is not a law school seminar. This is about ethics in current government conduct. And now it was Jasmine's turn to smile, just barely. Then let's talk about current conduct. She reached beneath the desk. Producing a single file, clean, unbranded, she placed it gently on the table like a quiet storm. In May of this year, she said, a voter access bill was stalled in the Senate Judiciary Committee. One of the key reasons for delay? Press. Sure, from an outside religious lobbying group closely aligned with your campaign. Palin stiffened. This group, Jasmine continued, has ties to a media network that aired segments calling inner-city voters frauds and sponges. Your office received a donation from that network's parent company 4 days later. The room tensed. Aides shifted uncomfortably. Phones buzzed under the table. Palin forced a laugh. We receive thousands of donations, Congresswoman. I don't sign off on each one. Maybe not, Jasmine replied. But you do sign the letters thanking them. Now the tension wasn't quiet, it was electric. Palin raised her voice, trying to recapture control. This is an ambush. I won't sit here and be slandered by. You're not sitting here to be comfortable, Jasmine snapped. You're sitting here to answer. If comfort was the measure of truth, every whistleblower in history would have kept their mouth shut. The chair reached for the gavel, but paused. Because even the senators who had rolled their eyes at Jasmine hours ago were now sitting forward, pens frozen in hand. She hadn't just objected. She'd made it impossible to pretend this hearing was neutral. She'd taken the term ethical standards and turned it into a cross-examination. The next exchange was brutal, not because it was loud, but because it was quiet. Palin shifted tactics. The legal jabs hadn't worked. The smirks weren't landing. So she reached for the shield that had always served her best. Family values, she began slowly. in that calibrated, compassionate tone she used when speaking to hometown churches and suburban moms on campaign trails. "I'm a mother of 5, she said, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I've raised children under the eyes of the public and the judgment of the media. And I've taught them what this country stands for: truth, decency, and the dignity of hard work." Jasmine folded her arms. She knew what was coming. Palin turned slightly toward her. "Congresswoman Crockett," she said, voice dripping with the performance of sincerity, "you've made statements suggesting that American family structures, Christian values in particular, are tools of oppression. I just want to ask, from one woman to another, do you believe in the moral compass this nation was founded on? Or are you here to rewrite it?" There it was, the real accusation. You don't belong here, not because of your politics, but because of your roots. Jasmine didn't blink. "Do I believe in a moral compass?" she said softly. "Absolutely." She placed a document on the table, "which is why I'm submitting this court record into the hearing." Palin's fingers curled around the armrest of her chair. "This document," Jasmine continued, "details the 2014 conviction of your former chief of staff, Paul Heller, for falsifying adoption records connected to a for-profit Christian agency, one that funneled undocumented children through churches without tracking their placements." Gasps rippled across the room. Jasmine's voice did not rise. "You held a press conference praising his compassionate heart the day after his indictment. Said he'd done more for children than any critic ever will. You called it political persecution." Palin stiffened, lips parted but silent. Jasmine turned toward the dais. "But the children didn't disappear because of politics. They disappeared because someone profited off the idea that faith exempts you from accountability." Then, looking back at Palin, "So yes, I believe in a moral compass. One that doesn't tilt when power is involved." Palin tried to speak, but for the first time, no one filled the silence for her. Jasmine continued, softer now, the tone of someone speaking from scar tissue, not ambition. "I grew up in a church that taught me how to pray, but it also taught me to ask questions. And what I've seen from your platform, Senator, is a religion of convenience, one that wraps itself in scripture when it wants to deflect, and sheds it when it's time to protect the vulnerable." The words landed like a gavel, one sentence, no performance. No spin. "Do your values bend with power?" Palin stared at her, and for the first time all morning, she had no answer. The silence after Jasmine's last words wasn't just heavy, it was radioactive. Palin didn't respond. Couldn't. She sat frozen, her practiced composure now cracked like thin ice under a spotlight. The cameras didn't blink. Neither did Crockett, but Jasmine didn't wait for an answer. She pivoted toward the chair, her voice precise. "I'd like to submit additional materials into the official record," she said. "Specifically, internal communications between Senator Palin's PAC and an external lobbying group known as Faith Patriots Alliance." The room stirred. That name had floated in political rumor mills for years, always one step removed from subpoenas, always draped in patriotic branding. "These documents," Jasmine continued, "were obtained through subpoena in a separate inquiry and made public under federal transparency protocols last month. They show coordinated messaging efforts designed to pressure Senate subcommittees into halting investigations into clergy abuse within federally subsidized faith-based youth shelters." Palin's face went pale. "I was not made aware of any such coordination," she snapped. "That group operates entirely independently." Jasmine held up the emails. "Then perhaps you can explain why your PAC's communications director is listed as the author of their media bulletins." The gavel hovered, but didn't fall. The chair looked as stunned as the staffers scrambling behind him. Jasmine kept going. "These aren't just emails. They're evidence. Evidence that a sitting U.S. Senator's office helped shape the narrative around one of the most horrifying institutional cover-ups in the past decade, all while collecting donations from those very institutions." Palin's voice broke slightly. "We were protecting religious freedom." "No," Jasmine said, firm but not loud. "You were protecting power and using religion as the shield?" Gasps audible now. Not just from aides or observers, from journalists, from other senators. Even a few longtime allies of Palin exchanged uneasy glances. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice or lean on drama. She simply stared across the room with the calm of someone who had no need to exaggerate the truth. It was already loud enough. "Do you know what it means?" she said softly, "when elected leaders choose silence over the safety of children? It means the institution we swore to serve is no longer ours. It belongs to fear, to money, to convenience." Palin gripped the table like it might anchor her. The chair finally cleared his throat. Unsure whether to gavel or just let the moment breathe, Jasmine looked down briefly, then back up. "You're not on trial, Senator. But your choices are, and history doesn't forget who looked away when the truth got uncomfortable." That sentence hung in the air. Outside the chamber, social feeds exploded. TikTok clips, Twitter threads, side-by-sides of Palin's past praise and Jasmine's revelations. Hashtags began to form, quickly becoming movements. #power over truth, #Crockett exposes, #receipts in session. Inside the room, a new energy had taken root. Something more dangerous than outrage, credibility, and Sarah Palin knew it. The hearing chamber had grown colder somehow. Or maybe it was just quieter, like the oxygen had been drained from the room. Leaving only tension and breath, Sarah Palin sat back, her arms crossed so tightly across her chest they looked braced for recoil. Her voice, when it came, was brittle. "You've made your points clear, Congresswoman," loud and theatrical. "But I wonder, when all is said and done, will the American people see through the performance?" Jasmine blinked once. "Not slow, not fast. Just, deliberate." She leaned forward, adjusted her mic, and didn't look at Palin. She looked at the room, and through the cameras, at the country. "I'm not here to perform," she said. "I'm here because we keep letting selective outrage dictate national policy." A murmur, subtle but present. "You say you're defending traditional values?" she continued, turning her gaze toward Palin now. "But let's unpack that." She pulled out a whiteboard, not digital, not flashy, simple, on it. She wrote in bold black marker, Jan 6, silence, Charlottesville, deflection. Uvalde, thoughts and prayers, student protests, OUTR, edgy she. Turn the board around. The camera lenses zoomed in. Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, the internet ate it alive in real time. "You reserve your voice," Jasmine said, "for when kids kneel in protest, but stay quiet when they die in classrooms." The room froze. "You quote scripture when it flatters your base, but ignore it when it says, 'Whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me.'" One of the younger senators shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "This isn't a culture war," she continued. "It's a war on memory. A battle between what actually happened and what's politically profitable to remember." Palin tried to interject, voice sharp. "You're moralizing a committee hearing. This is government, not gospel." Jasmine smiled. "Then stop legislating morality from pulpits and start protecting people in poverty." The words hit like a slap, because they weren't just clever. They were devastatingly true, a media analyst tweeted within seconds. Crockett just dismantled the moral posturing of an entire political wing with a dry erase board. Inside the chamber, there was nothing left for Palin to say. And everyone knew it, even she did. But Jasmine wasn't done. She stepped back from the mic, let the silence speak, and then asked, quieter now, heavier, "What kind of patriot only speaks when her tribe is harmed?" That line echoed, not because it was loud, but because for the first time, it couldn't be spun. Palin looked rattled now. The precision of Jasmine's words, the cool restraint of her delivery, the viral image of the whiteboard. It had all begun to do what no amount of yelling or finger-pointing could. Shift public opinion in real time. Still, Palin wasn't the type to surrender. She leaned in again, steeling her voice with a tone that had won her campaigns before, a blend of righteousness and faux innocence. "I find it fascinating," she began, eyes flicking to the cameras, "that someone who criticizes this nation so harshly has built her career within its very halls." She turned, ever so slightly, to face the committee. It must be nice to wear the victim badge while cashing taxpayer checks. The line had been designed for soundbite value, red meat for the base. She smirked, satisfied, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She opened her folder slowly, sliding out a color-coded spreadsheet. Each cell was backed by a public record. "Let's talk about checks," she said, placing the document on the table. She lifted one page up, held it between her fingers for the world to see. "This is a financial report from the Federal Election Commission, listing $4.3 million routed through your PAC to shell organizations that don't exist in any state corporate registry." Palin's smile faded. "This," Jasmine continued, "is another document showing your top-tier donor received a no-bid contract for charter school security upgrades 2 months after making a faith pledge donation. Now it was more than gasps. It was the subtle buzz of a press pool waking up to blood in the water. Palin cut in, strained but still controlled. "This is speculative. Your claims haven't been independently verified." "I'm submitting the verification right now," Jasmine replied. "Receipts, time-stamped, filed with the FEC and cross-referenced with state databases." She tapped the final sheet like a closing argument. "You funneled dark money through nonprofits claiming to protect the American family, while silencing those asking where that money actually went." Palin straightened in her chair, defensive now. "You're twisting this to fit a narrative." "No," Jasmine said, louder now, not shouting, but firm enough to fill the chamber. "I'm unraveling the one you've sold." She paused. "Senator Palin, you built your brand on being one of the people, but these numbers don't lie. You didn't defend the people. You sold them." The gallery erupted. Reporters darted toward their phones. The stenographer looked stunned. The chair banged the gavel, but even he didn't know why anymore. The order he was trying to restore had already been replaced. And outside, in living rooms and barber shops and coffee houses across the country, people weren't watching a hearing. They were watching history fracture in real time, Jasmine gathered. Her papers with calm precision, because she knew what had just happened. She hadn't. T just presented evidence. She had pulled back the curtain and revealed a politician, dressed in patriotism, standing in a spotlight of fraud. The hallway outside the hearing chamber was chaos, cameras flashing, interns whispering into earpieces and journalists elbowing for statements they wouldn't get. But inside, the air had thickened into something slower, more deliberate. Jasmine Crockett didn't just control the room now. She owned its moral tempo. Senator Palin sat rigid. Her team huddled behind her, whispering, frantic, one aide pressing a phone to her ear, mouthing, "They want to recess." But Jasmine had other plans. "I request a continuation of my statement," she said, not asking so much as declaring, "before the American people are asked to forget what they've just seen." The chair, still recovering from the explosion of tension, nodded slowly. "Proceed." Jasmine pulled out a sealed envelope. "This," she said, "is a sworn statement from a former campaign intern who worked inside the Palin for Senate operation during the summer of 2023. She was scheduled to appear as a witness. Today, her name has not been redacted because she signed her name in ink." Palin's face flushed. Her voice rose, brittle with panic. "That's a baseless smear. This hearing was never about campaign interns." Jasmine cut her off. She was prepared to testify that she witnessed data sharing between Senator Palin's PAC and a voter intimidation contractor during the last election cycle. She also alleges that internal memos instructed staff to flag polling locations in majority black neighborhoods as security threats to justify police presence on Election Day. Gasps again, this time not just from the press gallery. A senator 2 seats down from Palin slowly lowered his reading glasses. Palin's legal counsel stood abruptly. "We request a recess." Immediately. But Jasmine leaned into the mic. Her voice quiet now, almost sorrowful. "There will be no recess from truth." She unfolded the statement and began to read. Her voice didn't waver, it didn't rise, it held. The intern's words detailed late-night meetings, burn bags, email deletions, and one quote that stopped the room cold. "They said if she talks, will ruin her before she finishes law school. The court reporter froze. Even the chair didn't know what to say. Palin tried to regain footing, her voice now frayed. You're turning this chamber into a circus. This is political theater, not justice. Jasmine lowered the page. No, she said. This is what justice sounds like when it's finally given a microphone. She turned to the chair. I request the statement be entered into the official record, and that this committee issue immediate protective review for the whistleblower whose testimony was silenced by fear. For a long moment the room sat in stunned stillness. And then the chair, clearing his throat, replied, so ordered. That gavel came down not as a restoration of order, but as a confirmation of reckoning. Jasmine leaned back, not triumphant, but resolute. They had tried to use the hearing to put her on trial. Instead, she had turned it into a tribunal. And the verdict was beginning to right itself. Asterisk.